Humans are dumb. Oftentimes, worryingly so. But we have gotten better, and even though we still have our moments, we're not nearly as clueless as we used to be. This is especially true for the field of medicine. Today we have a deeper understanding of the human body than our ancestors could have imagined. But the road was long and far from steady. Medical history is littered with false teaching, scammers, useless remedies, and hopeless failures. But when did it all change? How did it change? When did medicine become less stupid? Let's go back to where it all started, and in this context, where it started means Hippocrates, a Greek intellectual who was born at around 460 BC. He wrote what may possibly have been the first set of medical documents in history, the Hippocratic corpus. The teachings contained in these documents would eventually be spread throughout the entire world and remain relevant as late as the 1800s. One of these teachings was the study of Humorism, which stated that yellow bile, black bile, blood, and phlegm were the four humors of the body. Good health could be ensured by keeping these humors in balance, while an excess or lack in one of more humor brought disease. Today, humorism is widely discredited and considered to be a fundamentally flawed understanding of how the human body works and what causes its illnesses. But for around 2,000 years, it was the cornerstone of Western medicine. And Hippocrates became a legend who is still remembered for his contributions to the medical sciences, although these days he is mostly praised for his teachings on the ethics of medicine rather than the human body itself. And it must also be said that many of the works attributed to him were actually copies written by others many years after he had died, seeing as how most of his original work has been lost to time. Some of these pieces have been accused of not being his own work at all, even the famous Hippocratic Oath. So, Western medicine had a less than desirable start. Our understanding of the human body wasn't exactly perfect, and it was about to get a lot worse. Galen of Pergamon, born 129 CE in the Roman Empire. His understanding and beliefs regarding medicine had greatly been influenced by Hippocrates, and he, like most intellectuals of his time, was an avid supporter of Humorism. And same as Hippocrates, Galen was also very interested in uncovering the secrets of anatomy. One of his works, the Functions of the Parts of the Body, aimed to discover, among other things, the purpose of every anatomical feature in the human body. He conducted many dissections throughout his life and made many groundbreaking discoveries. Only problem: Galen never dissected an actual human being, due to the Roman religion forbidding the practice. He was forced to settle for animals for all of his studies. This means that while his work did give some valid insight on the inner workings of our biology, many of his teachings and theories were utterly useless. For instance, he was the first to recognize the difference between venous and arterial blood, but he proposed a model of the human circulatory system that was obscenely wrong. Galenic teaching was used in schools of anatomy long after he died. It remained mostly undisputed for well over a millennium. This means that, after the collapse of the Roman Empire, Europe was heading into the Middle Ages arrogant and misinformed, which turns out is not a great combination. Humoral theory was widely taught throughout the Middle Ages, and people believed that the cure to many ailments could be found by rebalancing their humoral levels via bloodletting, vomiting, leeching, and enemas. Plants were also often used to cure sickness, with many plants being associated with their own disorders and disease, or being linked to treating specific parts of the body. For instance, the spotted leaves of lungwort were once used to treat tuberculosis due to them bearing a resemblance to lungs. That is, if you had the lungs of a goblin who enjoyed drinking copious amounts of penicillin. Monks would often make and administer their own remedies, with monasteries sometimes serving as hospitals that had their own medicinal gardens. If all else failed, you could always buy a healing potion from your local witch. Yeah, it's safe to say that medical advancement was basically non-existent during this time. By the 12th century, medical schools had popped up all over Europe. This is when we start to see some of the first instances of the practice of medicine being regulated. In 1140, Roger II of Sicily forbids anyone from practicing medicine without a license, stating that all those who wish to practice medicine must first be examined by his officers and judges. Those who defied him were imprisoned and had their property confiscated. In 1224, Frederick II of the Holy Roman Empire devised a system that seems very reminiscent of modern times. He required all medical candidates to first complete a 5-year course of study and then spend a year as an apprentice before passing an examination. However, these trends did not seem to catch on, and unfortunately, teaching on human anatomy was still wildly incorrect. That is when something amazing happened. The greatest revival of scientific discovery in Western history. The Renaissance. In the 16th century, a man by the name of Andreas Vesalius received his doctorate in medicine and was appointed a lecturer in surgery at the University of Padua. He believed that surgery required an intimate understanding of human anatomy, which at the time seemed to be a revolutionary idea, since most scholars chose to simply rely on Galenic teaching rather than studying the human body themselves. In a shocking move, Vesalius decided to conduct his own anatomical research. He spent much of his time dissecting cadavers, human cadavers, and so doing discovered many of Galen's mistakes. His discoveries caused him to suspect that Galen, whose work was considered essential to medical education, had not based his studies on actual human bodies, and that his conclusions were drawn from studying dogs, monkeys, pigs, and other animals. He proved Galen's work to be false in over 200 instances. He later created the 7 books on the structure of the human body, which provided a more accurate and extensive depiction of human anatomy than anyone else before him. Almost a century later, English physician William Harvey would further prove Galen wrong after he disproved his suggested model of the human circulatory system. Harvey would publish his findings in 1628. Now, many other great scientists, far too many to mention in this video, would continue to expand our knowledge on the human body, and so doing, shape medicine into what it is today. When the 19th century rolled around, great progress had been made. We now had a much deeper understanding of how the different parts of our body function and interact with one another. But we were still very much in the dark regarding how our bodies interact with the outside world. Many afflictions were still attributed to humoral unbalance, and contagious diseases such as cholera or plague were thought to be spread by poisonous vapors called miasma that emanated from rotting organic material. However, humoral theory was witnessing its last days. Many scientists such as Robert Koch, Louis Pasteur, and Joseph Lister were hard at work to establish a new theory: the germ theory of disease. Germ theory, which took a hold in the mid-1800s, gave new insight on how diseases were spread. Sicknesses that were previously thought to be humoral were actually caused by microbes in and around our bodies. These discoveries are what led to many of the hygiene regulations that medical professionals still adhere to when conducting surgery or other medical procedures. As these discoveries and breakthroughs took place, there was still a huge problem lurking in the background. You see, while most professional societies could set rules and regulations that governed a certain level of qualification and accountability for their members, there was still nothing stopping any random person off the street from seeing and treating his own patients, or even creating and selling his own medicine. Enter snake oilers and quacks. Quacks were quite prevalent during the 17th and 18th centuries. Many of them originated after the outbreak of bubonic plague in London in 1665. Very quickly after the outbreak, countless people from all over were flocking to buy magic mystery juice from unregulated, unqualified physicians who were either too uneducated or too common to be accepted into the medical schools of the time. These doctors would promote their products by honking at passers-by in the streets and fairs, hence the name Quacks, in accordance with their loud, obnoxious voices. These phonies would often prey on those who were either too poor or too marginalized to see real physicians. As these quacks started to make their way through Europe into the 18th century, many of them would start selling viper oil and similar products. Many charlatans would start selling a miracle elixir called snake oil that could apparently cure anything from joint pain to the most horrendous diseases. Although movies like to associate snake oilers with the Wild West, and they did in fact spread to the United States, many of the most profound snake oilers were based in Europe. So how did this change? To put it simple, there's no single event that can take credit for instating licensed, qualified individuals as the sole legal medical practitioners and shutting down fake medicine manufacturers. Different countries introduced varying degrees of legislation at different points in time, with some being more progressive than others. And even in spite of the boards that have been created, the acts that have been put in place, and many other magnificent achievements, quacks selling miracle cures haven't disappeared. There still are many challenges that need to be overcome, such as the rise of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which according to the WHO is one of the biggest threats to global health, food security, and development today. But when you become depressed about the nature of medicine today, and feel that many of our ways are still barbaric and idiotic, remember, we used to tackle fevers by draining our bodies of the blood we need to survive. We might not be where we need to be, but we are very far from where we were. You will live further into the future than your ancestors ever did. So hold your head up, because that future is bright.